Doug Robb, the powerful yet understated voice behind Hoobastank, is one of rock's most quietly influential frontmen of the early 2000s. Born Douglas Sean Robb on January 2, 1975, in Agoura Hills, California, he grew up surrounded by a mix of cultures and sounds. With a Japanese-American heritage from his mother's side, Doug's upbringing gave him a deep sense of discipline and balance that would later reflect in his music. From a young age, he was drawn to both melody and meaning, listening to everything from classic rock and grunge to soul and R&B. Unlike many of his contemporaries who pursued fame aggressively, Doug was more interested in expression. He once said in an interview that he never wanted to sing just to be heard, but to sing to connect. That philosophy became the foundation of Hoobastank's identity. In the mid-1990s, Doug met guitarist Dan Estrin in high school, and the two quickly bonded over their shared love for alternative rock bands like Incubus, Tool, and Rage Against the Machine. They started jamming together, soon forming a local band that would eventually become Hoobastank, a name that began as an inside joke but later became synonymous with post-grunge sincerity. Doug's voice stood out from the start, soulful, elastic, and emotionally raw. It could shift from soft vulnerability to explosive power within a single line. When the band released their self-titled debut album in 2001, hits like Crawling in the Dark and Running Away captured the restless energy of a generation searching for purpose. Doug's lyrical themes, introspection, struggle, growth, resonated deeply with listeners who saw in his voice their own unanswered questions. But it was in 2004 that Doug Robb and Hoobastank reached a defining moment with The Reason. The song, written by Doug during a period of personal reflection, became an anthem of remorse and redemption. With its simple piano melody and heartfelt lyrics, "I'm not a perfect person," Doug bared his soul in a way that transcended genres. The track became a global hit, earning Grammy nominations and solidifying the band's place in rock history. Critics praised Doug for his ability to convey complex emotions through restraint rather than theatrics. He didn't need to scream to be powerful. He simply told the truth. The Reason became more than a song. It was a confession that millions could relate to. Beyond his music, Doug Robb has always been known for his humility and authenticity. Despite global fame, he remained grounded, often describing himself as a guy who loves to sing and surf. His down-to-earth nature made him one of the more respected figures in rock, admired not only for his talent, but for his integrity. He never chased trends or fame. He stayed true to the emotional honesty that defined his band's sound. Throughout Hoobastank's later albums, from Every Man for Himself to Push Pull, Doug continued to evolve, experimenting with new tones and lyrical perspectives, while maintaining the same core message, that imperfection and vulnerability are part of being human. Doug Robb's influence extends far beyond Hoobastank's discography. His songwriting inspired a generation of alt-rock vocalists who sought to blend melody with meaning, and his voice remains instantly recognizable to anyone who grew up during the 2000s rock era. In an industry often driven by ego and image, Doug's quiet strength and emotional transparency made him timeless. He is not just the voice of The Reason, he's the voice of reason itself, reflective, sincere, and unafraid to feel. Today, Doug Robb stands as a reminder that true artistry doesn't always shout. Sometimes it speaks softly and still echoes forever. As Hoobastank's journey continued beyond their early 2000s peak, Doug Robb's role as the band's emotional and creative compass became even more pronounced. While many rock bands of their era faded into nostalgia, Doug's focus on authenticity allowed Hoobastank to maintain a loyal following. He never tried to chase the evolving trends of pop punk or emo. Instead, he leaned deeper into emotional storytelling and introspection. In interviews, Doug often reflected on fame with surprising humility, describing it as something that passes through you, not something you own. That mindset kept the band grounded even when The Reason was dominating global charts, film soundtracks, and radio stations. For Doug, success was never about recognition. It was about connection. He once said, "If one song helps someone get through a dark time, then everything else is noise." Following their massive success, Doug and the band faced the natural challenge of being known primarily for one song. But rather than let that define them, he embraced it with grace. He viewed The Reason not as a burden, but as a gift, a song that had taken on a life of its own. During live performances, he often spoke directly to fans before singing it, acknowledging that the song belonged as much to them as it did to the band. This genuine relationship between artist and audience became a hallmark of Hoobastank's legacy. Fans weren't just spectators, they were participants in a shared emotional experience. Doug's humility and empathy turned concerts into communal therapy sessions, where voices of thousands echoed his lyrics back in unison. Outside of music, Doug Robb maintained a quiet personal life. He's known for his love of surfing, photography, and spending time outdoors. Simple pleasures that kept him connected to reality amidst an industry often obsessed with excess. His Japanese-American roots also shaped his worldview, giving him a sense of balance, respect, and calm that translated into his artistry. While he never positioned himself as a spokesperson for identity, his cultural background subtly influenced his artistic discipline and emotional restraint. In an era where fame often led to burnout, Doug found peace in the steady rhythm of creative expression. As the 2010s unfolded, Hoobastank experienced a revival in appreciation. Younger audiences discovered the band through nostalgia-driven playlists and social media, with The Reason gaining new life on platforms like TikTok and YouTube. Doug embraced this resurgence with characteristic modesty, often expressing surprise and gratitude that their music still resonated with new generations. He also used this opportunity to reconnect with longtime fans, celebrating the endurance of songs that had once defined early 2000s rock culture. Doug's leadership style within Hoobastank remained collaborative rather than authoritarian. He viewed the band as a family, a group of individuals growing together through time. Even when creative differences arose, Doug prioritized open communication and respect. That mutual understanding allowed the band to weather the inevitable storms of the music industry. Their later albums showcased a matured sound, more reflective, more layered, while still carrying Doug's signature emotional clarity. Tracks like Incomplete and This Is Gonna Hurt revealed a man who had lived through success, struggle, and self-discovery, yet still found beauty in imperfection. Through the years, Doug Robb became an understated symbol of longevity in rock. He never relied on controversy or reinvention to stay relevant. His voice and sincerity did that on their own. His ability to balance vulnerability with strength, to sound broken yet hopeful, gave Hoobastank's music timeless appeal. Many modern artists cite him as an influence for his emotional honesty and effortless delivery. While other frontmen might have sought constant reinvention, Doug's evolution was quiet, organic, and real, mirroring the life of someone who never stopped growing, both as an artist and as a human being. In reflection, Doug Robb's story isn't about fame or fortune, it's about truth. It's the story of a man who used his voice not to impress, but to heal. His songs became soundtracks to countless lives, marking moments of love, regret, and redemption. And though the world may remember him best for the haunting simplicity of The Reason, those who truly listen to his body of work know that Doug Robb's legacy is much broader. He is the voice of emotional honesty in an age of noise, a reminder that vulnerability is not weakness, but power. In every note he sings, there is a quiet wisdom, the understanding that sometimes the greatest impact comes not from shouting, but from saying something real and letting it echo in the hearts of others. As Doug Robb matured as both a musician and a person, his understanding of art and purpose deepened. By the time Hoobastank entered their third decade together, Doug had transformed from a passionate young frontman into a reflective storyteller who had witnessed the full cycle of success: the rise, the struggle, and the rediscovery. He came to see music as not just performance, but as dialogue, an ongoing conversation between himself and the listeners who grew up with him. Each new project became less about commercial relevance and more about authenticity. He often spoke about how the songs that mean the most to him are not the ones that charted the highest, but the ones that reached someone at the right time. For Doug, impact was measured not in streams or sales, but in human connection. A fan message, a heartfelt thank you after a show, or someone saying a song helped them heal. In interviews, Doug reflected openly on how fame had changed his perspective. During Hoobastank's early success, the pressure to follow up the reason with another massive hit was immense. But over time, he realized that trying to recreate the past was futile. Growth required evolution. He embraced a creative philosophy rooted in honesty, to write what he felt, not what he thought people wanted. That mindset brought a newfound freedom to his artistry. On later albums, Doug's lyrics began to explore broader themes: self-acceptance, emotional fatigue, and the passage of time. His voice, slightly deeper and textured with experience, carried a resonance that only years of living and learning could create. Despite the shifting tides of the music industry, Robb remained deeply loyal to his craft and his fans. He continued performing live with the same intensity and sincerity that defined his early years, never taking a single crowd for granted. Hoobastank's concerts became gatherings of shared nostalgia and rediscovery, where generations sang side by side. Parents who'd grown up with Crawling in the Dark now attending shows with their children. Doug often paused mid-performance to thank the audience for still caring after so many years, a humility that endeared him even more to fans. Unlike many artists who grew weary of their biggest hits, Doug embraced them as part of his life story. When he sang The Reason live, it wasn't as a man repeating old lyrics. It was as someone reliving an honest confession, still relevant decades later. Behind the scenes, Doug also began mentoring younger musicians and speaking about mental health in the industry. His calm demeanor and reflective wisdom made him an inspiration for artists trying to balance creativity with emotional well-being. He frequently emphasized that success without peace was hollow, that music should bring joy, not exhaustion. His outlook, shaped by years of navigating fame's highs and lows, offered a refreshing contrast to the fast-paced, fame-driven culture surrounding modern entertainment. As time went on, Doug's artistry extended beyond just sound. He took up photography and visual storytelling, exploring the world through new lenses. Many of his photos, simple, nature-filled, and unfiltered, reflected the same emotional tone as his music: quiet, thoughtful, and deeply human. Fans who followed him on social media often commented that his posts felt like glimpses into a peaceful mind, a rare thing in the digital age. Doug's life offstage mirrored his lyrics, grounded, introspective, and focused on finding meaning in simplicity. When looking back on Hoobastank's legacy, Robb's leadership becomes even more impressive. While many bands fractured under pressure or ego, his ability to foster trust and collaboration kept the group united. He never saw himself as a frontman above others, but as a voice among equals. That humility helped Hoobastank survive the ever-changing waves of music trends and maintain their authenticity. To this day, Doug remains proud that the band's journey was self-driven. No manufactured image, no scandal, no gimmick, just real people making real music. Doug's story is one of quiet endurance. He didn't seek headlines or controversy. His focus was always on the craft and the message. Through decades of change, he proved that sincerity never goes out of style. His voice, once the soundtrack to youthful searching, has matured into a vessel of wisdom, one that still carries the same spark that first made millions listen. Robb is not just the man who sang The Reason. He is the reason many still believe in the honesty of rock music. His journey reminds us that true artists don't fade, they evolve, carrying their truth forward one song, one word, one heartfelt note at a time. As Robb's career progressed into its later chapters, his influence became something subtler, yet far more profound. No longer chasing fame or recognition, he became an embodiment of artistic longevity, proof that sincerity and substance can outlast trends. Fans who grew up listening to The Reason in their teenage years now spoke of how Doug's lyrics carried new meaning in adulthood. What once sounded like a song of apology became a meditation on forgiveness and growth. Doug himself often said that the beauty of music lies in its ability to change shape with time, to meet people where they are in life. And in that sense, his songs aged like reflections, evolving alongside those who loved them. In the studio, Doug continued to work quietly but diligently. He took greater creative control over Hoobastank's later releases, guiding the band toward a more mature, soulful sound. He spent long hours refining vocal takes, experimenting with softer tones, and stripping back instrumentation to let the lyrics breathe. His perfectionism wasn't about polish, it was about truth. Every note had to mean something. Every line had to feel lived in. He often recorded in dim light, closing his eyes to focus entirely on emotion rather than technique. Bandmates described him as calm but relentless, the kind of artist who never raised his voice, but whose commitment inspired everyone around him to dig deeper. As streaming platforms revived interest in early 2000s rock, Doug's presence re-emerged online. Clips of his live performances circulated on TikTok and YouTube, where a new generation discovered his voice. To their surprise, the singer behind one of the era's biggest hits wasn't a flashy celebrity, but a humble, grounded musician still performing with authenticity. Interviews from this period showed Doug reflecting on his younger self with gratitude and gentle humor. "We were just kids," he said in one interview. "We didn't realize we were writing something that people would still care about 20 years later. We were just being honest. Maybe that's why it stuck." And indeed, honesty remained his greatest strength. While many artists reinvent themselves to stay relevant, Doug's power came from his constancy, his refusal to compromise emotional truth for attention. That integrity made him an enduring figure in rock music's emotional landscape. His performances, though quieter and more restrained than before, carried even greater weight. When he sang The Reason or If I Were You in later years, there was a visible calm in him, a man who had lived through the emotions he once only wrote about. It was no longer the plea of a young man seeking forgiveness. It was the reflection of an older soul who had found peace. Outside of performing, Doug began to speak at small music workshops and industry panels about creative authenticity. He emphasized that the heart of music wasn't fame, but connection. "You don't have to be the loudest voice to be heard," he told one audience. "You just have to mean what you say." His humility struck a chord with young musicians navigating a digital era obsessed with virality. For them, Doug became a quiet mentor figure, someone who represented what it meant to endure without losing oneself. In the broader scope of music history, Doug Robb's legacy may not scream the loudest, but it resonates the longest. His voice became one of the defining sounds of early 21st century alternative rock, a blend of vulnerability, strength, and authenticity. Yet beyond the charts and tours, his real impact lies in the emotional lives of those who listened. People proposed to The Reason, reconciled with loved ones to running away, and found self-forgiveness through songs like Disappear. For countless fans, Doug's music wasn't background noise. It was a companion. Even as Hoobastank transitioned into legacy status, Doug never lost his curiosity for creation. He continued writing music, not necessarily for release, but for personal reflection. He once mentioned that some of his favorite songs were the ones no one had heard, private compositions that served as emotional journals. To him, songwriting was less about output and more about clarity. It was how he made sense of the world, one lyric at a time. Today, Doug Robb stands as a rare example of an artist who aged with grace and purpose. He never chased the spotlight. He simply followed the melody of his own truth. His story isn't about reinvention or reintegration into trends. It's about endurance, gratitude, and evolution. Through decades of change, he remained what he always was, a man with a voice that carries both power and tenderness, and a heart that continues to sing not for fame, but for meaning. In the echoes of his music, listeners still find pieces of themselves, a testament to a singer who, by simply being real, became timeless. As the years went by, Doug Robb's relationship with his audience evolved into something deeply personal, almost familial. Fans who had first heard The Reason as teenagers were now adults, many with families of their own, yet they continued to follow his journey with the same affection as before. At live shows, Doug often took a moment between songs to thank those who had grown up with him. He would smile warmly at the crowd and acknowledge the passage of time. How faces may have changed, but the emotions that once connected them remained the same. That mutual sense of gratitude created a bond unlike most between artist and listener. It wasn't based on fame or nostalgia, but on shared humanity. When he performed, Doug's stage presence was no longer defined by the restless energy of youth, but by quiet mastery. His voice, slightly deeper, weathered with experience, carried an authenticity that could only come from a life truly lived. Each lyric felt earned, each pause deliberate. Audiences noticed that he no longer strained to hit notes or dramatize emotion. Instead, he let the music breathe, letting silence carry as much meaning as sound. There was wisdom in his restraint, an understanding that music isn't just about performing, but about feeling. In interviews, Doug spoke candidly about how his perspective on success had changed. He no longer measured achievement by record sales or chart positions, but by the sincerity of connection. "When someone tells me our song helped them through something hard," he once said, "that's worth more than any award." This humility became one of his trademarks, the unshakable core of who he was. Even in an industry known for ego and reinvention, Doug remained grounded, almost defiant in his simplicity. Outside of the spotlight, Doug led a life that reflected that same modesty. He preferred spending time with family and close friends over high-profile appearances. He enjoyed hiking, reading, and long drives with music from other eras playing through the speakers, from the Beatles and Pink Floyd to Radiohead and Jeff Buckley. He studied songwriting not just as craft, but as philosophy, often saying that every great song begins with a question, not an answer. Those who knew him personally described him as thoughtful, introspective, and quietly funny, a man who could turn even ordinary moments into meaningful reflections. As time moved forward, Doug's influence began to ripple into places few expected. Young artists across genres, from indie rock to acoustic pop, cited him as an inspiration. His vocal style, emotional honesty, and lyrical vulnerability became blueprints for a new generation of musicians seeking depth over spectacle. Even artists far younger than Hoobastank's heyday found resonance in his words. Social media tributes from rising singers often quoted lines from The Reason, calling it one of the songs that made them want to write music in the first place. Doug, ever humble, downplayed such recognition, but privately, he was deeply moved by it. He once said in an interview, "It's surreal to think something you wrote in your 20s could still touch people decades later. It's like leaving a message in a bottle and finding one found it years after you threw it in the ocean." That poetic view of his career of art as a timeless message defined how he saw himself not as a celebrity, but as a storyteller. Even as trends shifted and the music world continued to change, Doug never lost his sense of purpose. He kept writing, performing, and connecting, not for attention, but for meaning. His later concerts often included stripped-down acoustic sets, where the power of his voice and the raw honesty of his lyrics created a quiet magic that silenced the crowd. Fans describe these performances as spiritual, almost healing experiences, moments where the noise of life fell away and only the truth of the song remained. Doug Robb's story is not one of endless reinvention or celebrity drama, but of integrity and perseverance. He represents what it means to be an artist who grows with his audience, who matures without losing heart, and who proves that authenticity never goes out of style. His music continues to resonate not because it was designed to trend, but because it was built from something real: emotion, experience, and empathy. Even now, when his name is mentioned, it carries quiet respect. People remember his voice, strong yet tender, soulful yet steady, and the songs that became part of their life's soundtrack. In the end, Doug Robb's greatest achievement isn't just the success of a hit song. It's the enduring emotional legacy he left behind. Through every lyric, every melody, and every heartfelt performance, he reminded the world that true artistry isn't about fame. It's about feeling, connection, and truth that never fades. As Doug Robb's career entered its later chapters, he became something of a mentor figure in the rock community, not through formal programs or flashy collaborations, but through quiet guidance and genuine conversations with emerging musicians. He had lived through the changing eras of the music industry, from physical CDs to streaming platforms, and understood both the struggles and opportunities that came with those transitions. When younger artists sought him out for advice, Doug's counsel was simple but profound. Don't chase the moment, chase what's real. Trends fade, but honesty stays. Those words became a kind of mantra among those who admired his grounded approach to fame and creativity. Despite his humility, Doug never lost his spark for performance. Each tour, whether in a small venue or a festival stage, reminded him why he started in the first place. He often said that the stage was where he felt most human, not because of the spotlight, but because of the shared emotion flowing between him and the audience. He believed that music wasn't a one-way message. It was a conversation, a give and take of energy and emotion that connected people across backgrounds and generations. Fans would often see him close his eyes mid-performance, as if reliving the emotions behind each lyric, lost in the timeless moment of creation. As Hoobastank songs continued to find new life through film, television, and online platforms, Doug's voice reached audiences who weren't even born when the band first broke through. Viral moments on social media brought renewed attention to songs like The Reason and Crawling in the Dark, introducing the timeless themes of love, self-discovery, and redemption to a new digital generation. Doug found it amusing and touching to see young fans covering his songs on TikTok or to read comments from people discovering the band for the first time. "It's funny," he once remarked, "music really doesn't age. People just rediscover it when they need it most." In between tours and writing sessions, Doug also began giving more interviews focused on the philosophy of music and life balance. He spoke openly about mental health, burnout, and the importance of staying grounded in an industry built on constant validation. He discussed how fame, while rewarding, could easily distort one's sense of self if not kept in check. His perspective, calm, reflective, and deeply human, resonated with many who saw him as proof that you could achieve longevity without losing authenticity. There were times when fans and journalists wondered why Doug and Hoobastank didn't chase trends or produce more commercial hits after their peak years. But for Doug, the answer was always clear. The band's purpose wasn't to chase relevance. It was to make music that meant something. Every album they released, even when it didn't dominate the charts, was filled with sincerity. He believed that music should be made from emotion, not calculation. That guiding principle of valuing expression over expectation became the foundation of his artistic legacy. Over time, Doug's artistry evolved beyond rock. He began exploring acoustic, ambient, and even experimental sounds, finding new ways to express old emotions. He often collaborated with independent producers, lending his voice to tracks that carried a quieter, more introspective tone. These projects didn't make headlines, but they revealed a man unafraid of change, someone who understood that growth doesn't mean abandoning your roots, it means expanding them. Critics and fans alike began referring to Doug Robb as one of rock's most underrated voices, not only because of his vocal talent, but because of the emotional intelligence behind his lyrics. His songs didn't rely on shock or spectacle. They spoke softly but deeply, carrying messages that stayed with listeners long after the music stopped. Many of his lyrics, when revisited years later, seemed even more meaningful, reflections of a man who had seen the highs and lows of life and found beauty in both. Today, Doug Robb's name may not dominate pop culture headlines, but in the hearts of those who truly listen, his presence endures. He remains a symbol of authenticity in an age of excess, a reminder that true artistry doesn't need to shout to be heard. His legacy isn't built on viral moments or celebrity gossip, but on the quiet power of connection, on the timeless truth that music, at its best, speaks directly to the soul. Doug once said in an interview, "The songs outlive us all. That's the goal, to leave something that makes someone feel less alone." And in that single statement lies the essence of his journey, a humble artist who gave the world his truth, and in doing so, helped millions find their own.